A single dad saved a woman from a wreck. The company fired him on Friday. She bought it on Monday. The car was already in the ditch when Marcus saw it. He was coming around the bend on Route 9, driving the same road he drove every Tuesday during his lunch break, heading to the pharmacy to pick up Chloe's asthma inhaler before it ran out again. The silver sedan had gone nose first into the drainage ditch on the right side of the road, front end buried, back wheels still spinning in the air like the car had not yet accepted what had happened to it. Steam was rising from under the hood. The hazard lights were not on. No other car had stopped. The road was empty in both directions. Marcus pulled over without thinking about it. He did not sit in his car and call 911 from a safe distance. He did not slow down and keep driving, because he was already running close on time. He opened his door, left his engine running, and jogged across the gravel shoulder toward the ditch. The morning air was cold. It was the kind of November cold that gets into your ears and stays there. He could hear something hissing from the engine, not a dangerous sound, just a hot fluid meeting cold air sound. And he could hear, very faintly, a woman's voice. She was conscious. That was the first thing he checked when he reached the driver's side window. The woman inside was in her 50s, silver hair cut short, wearing a dark green coat that had probably been expensive once, and was now pressed against a deployed airbag that had done its job. She was bleeding from a cut above her left eye. Not heavily, the kind of cut that looks worse than it is because the forehead bleeds more than it should. She was looking at him through the glass with the particular expression of someone who is embarrassed more than they are frightened. Marcus tried the door. It would not open. The frame had bent just enough in the impact to seal it shut. He pulled out his phone, dialed 911, told them the location, described the car, described the woman, said she was conscious and alert, said he was going to stay with her. The dispatcher told him help was 11 minutes out. He said fine. He went around to the passenger side. That door opened. He leaned in across the center console, reached over, and put his hand on her arm. Just that, a hand on her arm. "I am right here," he said. "My name is Marcus. What is your name?" She told him her name was Delia. "Delia," he said, "are you in any pain right now?" She said her chest hurt a little from the seatbelt. She said she thought she had bitten her cheek. She said a dog had run into the road. A brown dog, she kept saying. A brown dog just came out of nowhere, and she had swerved and the shoulder crumbled under the passenger side tires, and then she was in the ditch before she could correct it. She seemed more concerned about the dog than about herself. Marcus told her the dog had probably made it. He had no way of knowing that. He said it anyway. He kept her talking. Not about the accident. That was the wrong thing to talk about. It would make her replay it, feel the impact again, go somewhere inside herself that was not calm. He asked her about her coat instead. He said it was a nice coat. What color would she call that? Was it green or was it more like a dark blue depending on the light? She looked at him like he was a little strange, which was exactly what he wanted, because looking at him like he was strange meant she was not thinking about the blood on her face, or the way the car had crumpled, or how fast things can go wrong on an ordinary Tuesday. She told him the coat was hunter green. She had bought it in Edinburgh 12 years ago on a work trip and she had refused to get rid of it. He told her that was a good reason to keep a coat. She almost smiled. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes, 2 of them. They were efficient and professional, and they had Delia out of the car and onto a stretcher, with a neck brace in place and a bandage pressed against her forehead, before Marcus had fully stood up from where he had been crouching beside the open passenger door. One of them asked if he was family. He said no. He said he had just stopped. The paramedic nodded and went back to work. A police officer arrived 2 minutes after the ambulance. He took a brief statement from Marcus, name, what he saw, when he stopped, and told him he was free to go. Marcus walked back to his car. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment. He checked the time. He was 47 minutes late getting back to work. He pulled out of the shoulder and drove toward the warehouse, not toward the pharmacy. Chloe's inhaler would have to wait until after his shift. He would call the school nurse on the way and let her know, because Chloe always kept a backup in the nurse's office, and she would be fine, but he liked to let people know. He drove with the heat running and the radio off. He was not thinking about what he had done. He was not congratulating himself or rehearsing the story he would tell. He was thinking about whether the school nurse picked up quickly or put you on hold, and whether the pharmacy closed at 6 or 6:30, and whether he had remembered to sign Chloe's permission slip for the class trip to the nature center. He was thinking about all the ordinary things because the ordinary things were his life. They were the whole of his life, and he had been keeping them running for 3 years alone, and today had made him 47 minutes late, and that was going to matter, because it always mattered when you could not afford for things not to matter. He was right about that. Marcus Tillman was 41 years old. He had lived in the same Ohio city his entire life, except for 2 years in his early 20s when he had driven trucks long haul and seen enough of the country to decide he preferred to be home. He had married at 28, a woman named Karen, who had bright eyes and strong opinions, and who had, by the time she left, become someone he no longer recognized, and who he believed had become someone she no longer recognized either. She was not a bad person. She had simply decided that the life she was living was not the life she wanted, and she had left to find the other one, and she had not taken Chloe with her. Marcus had never once spoken badly about Karen in front of his daughter. This was not because he had no complicated feelings about it. It was because Chloe was 8 years old and had enough to carry without also carrying her father's bitterness. He raised her alone. He did what single parents do, which is to say he did everything, always, with whatever was available. He packed her lunch the night before because mornings were too rushed. He read to her on weeknights because she liked it, and because it was the one part of the day that was purely theirs. Just the two of them, with a book and no clocks. He attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every birthday party he could manage, and on the ones he could not manage because of a shift he could not swap, he made sure there was a card and an explanation and a replacement plan. He had worked at Hendrick Logistics for 9 years. He operated a forklift in the main distribution warehouse, which was not glamorous work and was not meant to be glamorous. It was precise work. It was work that required you to pay attention all the time, because the consequences of not paying attention were measured in crushed pallets and pulled muscles and, in the worst cases, things that could not be undone. Marcus was good at it. He was good at it the same way he was good at being a father, not because he made it look easy, but because he was consistent. He showed up. He did what the job required. He did not complain about the things that were not worth complaining about. His supervisor at the warehouse was a man named Dwight Carver, who had been there for 4 years and who managed through a combination of minor authority and major insecurity. Marcus had learned in the first year how to work around Dwight, not against him, not in defiance, just around him, the way water works around a stone in a stream. He stayed on the right side of every written rule. He was friendly without being familiar. He had never given Dwight a reason to come after him, or so he thought. He parked in the warehouse lot at 1:34 p.m. He clocked in at the side entrance. He pulled his vest on at the locker and walked toward the dock floor. Dwight was standing at the edge of the dock with a clipboard, which was how Dwight always stood when he was waiting for something. Not checking the clipboard, just holding it, like a prop that gave him a reason to be where he was. "You are 47 minutes past the end of your lunch break," Dwight said. "I know," Marcus said. "I stopped at an accident on Route 9. A woman had gone into the ditch. I called 911 and stayed with her until the paramedics arrived." Dwight wrote something on the clipboard. "I am going to need you to come to the office after your shift," Dwight said. Marcus looked at him for a moment. "All right," he said. He put on his gloves and went back to work. That was how Tuesday ended. 47 minutes late, because a woman named Delia had swerved for a brown dog on Route 9, and because Marcus Tillman was the kind of man who stopped. He picked Chloe up from the after-school program at 5:45. She was wearing a paper crown she had made in art class and carrying a drawing of what she said was a horse but which looked more like a cloud with legs. He told her it was a very good horse. She told him she already knew that. He heated up pasta for dinner. He read 2 chapters of her book to her. He tucked her in at 8:15. Then he sat at the kitchen table and looked at the job application he had bookmarked on his phone 2 months ago, the one for a supervisory position at a different warehouse 35 miles east. He had not applied. The commute would have required Chloe to go to a neighbor before school each morning. He had decided the math did not work in their favor. He closed the tab. He washed the dinner dishes and went to bed. He did not know yet what Dwight Carver had already written on that clipboard. He did not know that by Thursday the paperwork would be drawn up, or that by Friday morning a letter would be waiting for him in the HR office with language in it that made 47 minutes sound like abandonment. He did not know any of that yet. He knew only that he had stayed with a woman named Delia, while steam rose from her hood, and she told him about a coat she bought in Edinburgh, and that he had gotten home in time to hear about the paper crown and the horse that looked like a cloud, and that both of those things had been worth doing. He fell asleep thinking about neither of them. That is the particular grace of men who do the right thing without needing it to feel significant. It does not keep them up at night. It does not swell in their chest. It simply is what it is, filed quietly away with everything else they have done without an audience or a reward, because the audience was never the point. The point was the woman in the ditch. The point was always getting home to Chloe. Everything else was paperwork. He just did not know yet how much paperwork there was going to be. Marcus walked into the HR office on Thursday at the time they told him to come in. He brought 3 things with him. He brought his 9-year employment record, which he had printed from the company portal the night before, no write-ups, no absences marked unauthorized, no performance warnings, not one. He brought the call log from his phone showing the 911 call placed at 12:48 p.m. on Tuesday, lasting 4 minutes and 12 seconds, and he brought the name of the responding officer, which he had gotten by calling the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's office the previous evening, and explaining what he needed and why. He was not aggressive about any of this. He laid the papers on the table in the HR conference room, the way a person lays down a hand of cards when they know the hand is good, quietly, without theater, because the cards speak for themselves. The HR coordinator across from him was a young woman named Paige Elliott. She was probably 26, 27. She had the look of someone who had been hired to process paperwork and had only recently been told that some of the paperwork involved people's lives. She looked at the documents Marcus put on the table, and then she looked at Dwight Carver, who was sitting beside her with the clipboard on his knee. "I understand the policy," Marcus said. "I was 47 minutes over my lunch break. I understand that is on the longer side of what gets flagged. What I am telling you is that I was on a public road, on my own time, in my own car, and a woman was injured and alone in a drainage ditch. I called emergency services, and I stayed with her. The paramedics can confirm it. The officer can confirm it. My phone records confirm it." Dwight Carver said that the policy did not have an exemption for emergencies. Marcus looked at him. "There is not a written exemption," Dwight said, adjusting his tone just slightly. "The policy is applied uniformly. Paige said she would need to escalate to upper management, and that they would have a decision by Friday. She said it in the way people say things when they already know what the decision is going to be, and they are hoping the other person can hear it between the words and prepare themselves." Marcus thanked her. He folded his copies of the documents, put them back in his jacket pocket, and walked back out to the dock floor. He worked the rest of his Thursday shift without speaking more than he needed to. His forklift ran clean. His counts were right. At the end of the shift he clocked out and drove to the pharmacy, which was still open, and picked up Chloe's inhaler, and then drove to her school where she was at the tail end of an after-school soccer practice, running across the muddy field in cleats that were already a size too small for her but still had enough room in them that Marcus had decided they would last one more season. He watched her for a few minutes from the fence before she saw him. She ran with her arms wide out, for balance, the way children run when they are still learning that their arms do not actually help, but have not yet decided to tuck them in. She was laughing at something another girl had said. Her hair had come most of the way out of its ponytail. Marcus put his hands in his jacket pockets and waited. She spotted him on the second lap across the field, and she waved both arms over her head like he was a ship and she was a lighthouse, and he raised one hand back. That night he helped her with her math homework, and tried not to think about Friday. He was not entirely successful. He lay awake for a while, turning the conversation in the HR office over in his mind. Not with panic. Panic was not something he could afford to maintain, not as a single parent, because panic was a luxury that required someone else to be steady, and he was the only steady one available. He thought about it the way he thought about mechanical problems on the forklift, methodically, looking for the weak point, trying to understand what the machine was actually doing, versus what it was supposed to be doing. What he kept coming back to was Dwight's face in that conference room, the clipboard, the way he had said, uniformly, with a very slight increase in volume that suggested he had rehearsed it. Men did not rehearse the word uniformly unless they had decided in advance that they were going to need it. Marcus had worked alongside Dwight Carver for 4 years. He had watched Dwight look the other way when other employees came back from lunch 15 minutes late because they had been eating with Dwight in the break room. He had watched Dwight approve schedule swaps for men he liked and deny them for men he did not. He had watched Dwight, on one specific occasion the previous spring, send a newer employee home early with a documented excuse for leaving the premises before shift end, because that employee had helped Dwight move a piece of furniture on the previous weekend, and Dwight felt that something was owed. None of that was in writing anywhere. That was the point of how Dwight operated. He kept his preferences invisible and his enforcement selective, and he had just found a policy clean enough to hide behind. Marcus turned off the light at 11:15 and told himself to sleep. He did not sleep well. Friday morning arrived gray and damp, the kind of morning that Ohio does in November that is not cold enough to be honest about winter and not warm enough to pretend it is fall. Marcus drove Chloe to school, walked her to the entrance, told her he would be there at pickup. She told him he always said that. He said that was because it was always true. He drove to the warehouse. He clocked in. At 9:20 a.m., Paige Elliott appeared on the dock floor and told him they needed a few minutes in the office. The letter was already printed. It was sitting on the table when he walked in, face down, and Paige turned it over and slid it across to him with both hands the way people deliver news they wish they did not have to deliver. He read it. The language was clean and impersonal, which somehow made it worse than if it had been angry. It cited the attendance policy. It cited the specific timestamp of his return. It used the phrase, failure to comply with shift attendance protocols, and the phrase, unauthorized abandonment of assigned duties, and Marcus read both of those phrases carefully, because the word abandonment was doing a particular kind of work in that sentence that he found interesting. He had stayed, with a woman who was bleeding, in a ditch. The letter called that abandonment. He folded it once, along the crease the printer had made, and he put it in his jacket pocket. He asked Paige if there was an appeals process. She said there was a 30-day window to submit a written appeal to district management. He thanked her. He shook her hand, which seemed to surprise her. He did not shake Dwight's hand, not because he was making a point, but because Dwight had not offered it. He walked to the locker room. He took his personal items out of his locker, a water bottle, a spare pair of gloves, a photograph of Chloe that he had taped to the inside of the door 2 years ago when she was 6, and missing her 2 front teeth. He put everything in a plastic bag that had been in his jacket pocket since the pharmacy trip. He drove out of the lot. He did not go straight home. He drove for a while, not to anywhere particular, just through the streets of the city he had lived in his whole life, past the school where he had gone as a kid, past the park where he used to take Chloe on Saturday mornings before the weather turned. He needed the movement. He needed the wheel in his hands and the road unrolling ahead of him before he could sit still. After 20 minutes, he pulled into the parking lot of a gas station and sat there with the engine idling. He took the letter out of his pocket and read it again. He thought about the rent, which was due in 18 days. He thought about Chloe's cleats, which genuinely could not last another month. He thought about the health insurance that had been covered through his job and which would end at the conclusion of the current pay period. He thought about Chloe's asthma, which was mild but required the inhaler that was now sitting in her backpack at school, covered by a prescription that had been run through his insurance. He thought about all of this with the particular precision of a man who had been carrying a budget in his head for 3 years and knew exactly where every number lived. Then he put the letter back in his pocket. He put the car in gear. He drove to the school, parked, and waited for pickup time in the car. And when Chloe came through the doors at 3:15, she was still wearing the friendship bracelet she had made on Tuesday, and she had a star sticker on the back of her hand for something she had done in reading class. She climbed into the back seat and said, "You are already here." "I told you I would be," he said. She looked at him in the rearview mirror. She was a perceptive child in the way children sometimes are when they have learned early to read the adults around them for information the adults are not saying out loud. Did something happen? She said. I am going to figure some things out, he said. Everything is fine. It was the second time in 1 week that he had said something to her that he could not fully verify. He drove them home. He heated up soup. He helped her with her spelling words and he read to her. And he tucked her in at 8:15, same as always, same as every night. Because the routine was what held things together when other things were coming loose. And Marcus Tillman understood that better than almost anything else he had ever learned. After she was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. He pulled up the job application for the warehouse 35 miles east. He stared at it for a long time. The commute would mean Chloe going to the neighbor's house each morning. The pay was comparable to what he had been making. The insurance would take 90 days to kick in. 90 days without coverage for an 8-year-old with asthma. He closed the laptop. He went to bed. He did not know that somewhere across the city, in a quiet house with good lighting and a wall of windows, a woman named Delia Marsh was sitting at her own desk with a phone in her hand, working through her third call of the evening, and that his name had come up in the second one. He did not know that the word abandonment in his termination letter was, at that very moment, doing a different kind of work than Dwight Carver had intended. He did not know any of it yet. He knew only that the letter was in his jacket pocket, and the jacket was on the chair by the door, and tomorrow was Saturday, and he had promised Chloe pancakes. He was going to make the pancakes. Everything else he would handle afterward. The hospital had kept Delia Marsh for 2 nights, not because her injuries were serious. They were not. But because she was 54 and had hit an airbag at speed, and the attending physician was a cautious man who believed in observation. She had a bruised sternum, 4 stitches above her eye, and a bitten cheek that made eating uncomfortable for 3 days. She was discharged Thursday morning with instructions to rest and a follow-up scheduled for the following week. She did not rest. Delia ran a company. She had been running it for 19 years, since she was 35, and had taken a business loan that the bank had not wanted to give her, and had built Marsh Supply Solutions from a single rented office and a used delivery van into one of the more significant regional logistics operations in the state. She was not the kind of person who rested when there was work in front of her, and there was always work in front of her. But she could not stop thinking about the man on Route 9. She had tried, in the ambulance, to get his name. The paramedics had not caught it. They had been focused on her, which was their job and which she understood, but she wished one of them had thought to ask. She described him to the officer who came to take her statement at the hospital. Tall, black, mid-40s she guessed, quietly spoken, wearing a dark jacket with what she thought was a company logo on the chest. She could not read the logo. She had been bleeding into her eye at the time. She asked the officer if he had the man's contact information from the scene. He said he had taken a brief statement but had not retained personal contact details. It was not standard procedure for a witness who was not involved in the incident. She thanked him and called her assistant, a young man named Owen, and asked him to see what he could find. Owen was thorough. He found nothing in the first day, which meant the man was not a public figure, which was expected. He found nothing useful in the second day either. Delia tried every reasonable avenue she could think of: the county police report, the hospital administrator's office, the paramedic company's public contact line, and each of them pointed at privacy protections that she respected intellectually and found deeply inconvenient personally. On the 3rd day after her discharge, which was a Sunday, Owen called her. "The jacket," he said. "You said you thought it had a company logo." She said she did. Route 9. Around lunchtime, distribution warehouse nearby. I checked the industrial directory for that stretch of the county. There is one distribution center that fits. Hendrick Logistics. She looked up the number and called it the next morning, Monday, which brought her to a receptionist who transferred her, intending to put her through to operations. She was put through to HR. The woman who answered the HR line was named Paige. She was polite and professionally cautious in the way HR people learn to be, giving information carefully, the way a person gives something fragile across a table. Delia explained who she was and why she was calling. She said she was looking for an employee who had stopped to help her at an accident on Route 9 the previous Tuesday. She described him. She said she wanted to thank him. There was a pause on the line. Is the employee in some kind of trouble? Delia said. Another pause. I am not really in a position to discuss individual employee situations, Paige said, and the way she said it told Delia everything about what had happened. Is the employee still employed here? Delia said. The pause that followed that question was the longest one yet. It lasted just slightly too long for the answer to be yes. I am not able to comment on employment status, Paige said. Delia thanked her and ended the call. She sat very still for a moment. Outside her office window, the November sky was the particular shade of flat gray that settles over Ohio like a lid in the latter part of the year. She had grown up in this state. She had never left it. She knew that sky the way she knew the sound of her own voice. She picked her phone back up and called Owen. I need you to find the full name of the employee at Hendrick Logistics, who drove a blue sedan and stopped at an accident on Route 9 last Tuesday, around 12:45 p.m. Owen came back to her in 2 hours with a name. Marcus Tillman, 41 years old, 9 years of employment at Hendrick Logistics, forklift operator. He had called 911 from his personal phone at 12:48 p.m. on Tuesday. The responding officer had logged the call and the name. Owen had found the incident report through the public records process, and the name was in it. Delia pulled up everything she could find publicly. There was not much. A man who worked a warehouse job and raised his daughter and had no interest in being findable. He did not have social media accounts. He had no public-facing professional profile. He was, as far as the internet was concerned, exactly what he was, a private person living a private life. She called Owen again. I want to know who owns Hendrick Logistics, the holding company, the principals, all of it. I want ownership structure and their current financial position. Owen said he would need a day. She told him he had until morning. He had it to her by 7 a.m. the following day. Hendrick Logistics, Ohio operations, was owned by two brothers, Gerald and Frank Hendrick, both in their late 60s. Gerald had been the operational driver and had been drawing down his involvement over the past 3 years. Frank handled finance. They had been looking to sell since 2023, had approached 2 potential buyers who had not moved forward, and were currently carrying a moderate debt load on the 3 warehouse properties they leased. Their revenue had been flat for 18 months. They were not in trouble, but they were also not growing, and men in their late 60s who are not growing and not selling start to feel the weight of what they are carrying. Delia sat with that information for a long time. She was not a sentimental person. She was practical in the way people are practical when they have built something real from nothing and cannot afford to confuse feelings with decisions. But she was also a person who understood that the world had a way of presenting you, occasionally, with a very clear picture of what was right and what was not right, and that the question in those moments was not whether you saw the picture, but whether you were willing to do something about it. She had been in a ditch. She had been bleeding. She had been alone. And then she had not been alone. That was a simple fact. And the person who had made it a fact had been fired for it, by a company that had written the word abandonment into his termination letter. And Delia had read enough termination letters in her career to know what that word was there to do. It was there to make his case difficult. It was there to frame the story in a particular way before he could frame it himself. She found it deeply offensive. She called her attorney, a woman named Gloria, on Tuesday morning. She told Gloria what she wanted to do. Gloria said, "You want to acquire a logistics company because they fired the man who helped you. I want to acquire it because the Ohio operations fit our regional expansion goals. The price will be reasonable given their current position. And the ownership is motivated," Delia said. And yes. Gloria was quiet for a moment. "All right," she said. "Let me look at the numbers." Gloria called back that afternoon. The numbers were, in her professional opinion, reasonable. The Ohio operations were underperforming but structurally sound. The warehouse leases were transferable. The client accounts were stable. There were no significant outstanding liabilities. The asking price, based on comparable sales in the regional market, would sit in a range that Marsh Supply Solutions could absorb without destabilizing their current capital position. "Make contact with the Hendrick brothers," Delia said. "Tell them we are interested in an exploratory conversation. Do not tell them why we are interested. And do not mention Marcus Tillman." "Understood," Gloria said. One more thing. What do you want to do about the employee situation? If we acquire the company, HR decisions become ours. Delia thought about a man who had held her hand in a ditch and talked about a coat from Edinburgh until she could hear the sirens. I will handle that personally, she said. Gloria reached out to Frank Hendrick the next morning. Frank called Gerald. They had a conversation that lasted about 35 minutes, during which neither of them needed to say the thing they were both thinking, which was that a buyer was a buyer, and motivated sellers do not ask a buyer to explain their timing. They accepted a meeting for the following Monday. Delia did not go to that meeting herself. She sent Gloria and her CFO, a careful man named Stewart who had been with her for 11 years, and who had the quality, rare and valuable in a finance person, of being genuinely unreadable during a negotiation. They went in with a number that was fair, and a timeline that was attractive, and a set of conditions that were limited and clear. The conditions were these. All current employees retained for a minimum of 12 months. All existing client contracts honored through their current terms. And one additional clause, drafted by Gloria at Delia's specific instruction, that named Marcus Tillman by name, his reinstatement, his back pay for the days following his termination, and the creation of a floor operations supervisor position to be offered to him at a salary increase of 32% over his previous rate. Frank Hendrick, reading the addendum, asked Stewart what the significance of that specific employee was. Stewart said that Miss Marsh had personal reasons she preferred not to disclose. Frank read the clause again. He looked at Gerald. Gerald, who had spent 40 years in the freight business and had seen a great many things, simply shrugged. They signed. The papers were executed on Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, the acquisition was legal and binding. Delia picked up her phone. She had looked up Marcus Tillman's number through the same public records process that had given her his name. She had not called it before now because she had wanted the papers signed first. She had not wanted to offer him something and then have the deal fall through, and have offered him nothing but a phone call from a woman he barely remembered. The papers were signed. She called. It rang 3 times. Hello. He had a low, careful voice. The voice of a man who answered numbers he did not recognize with a particular kind of neutral readiness, because he had learned not to assume that unknown numbers were good news. Marcus Tillman, she said. Yes. My name is Delia Marsh. We met on Route 9 2 weeks ago. You stopped at my accident. There was a brief silence. I remember, he said. How are you doing? Are you all right? She noticed that his first question was about her health, not about why she was calling. I am fully recovered, thank you. Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I want to do it directly. I found out what happened after the accident. I know you were terminated. I know the reason given. I want you to know that I found that deeply wrong, and I have done something about it. A longer silence. What do you mean, he said. She told him. She kept it plain. She did not dress it up or make it dramatic. She told him about the acquisition, about the addendum, about the supervisor position, about the back pay. She told him the offer was his to accept or decline, that there was no pressure, and that if he preferred to take a different path, she respected that completely. When she finished, there was a silence on the line that lasted long enough that she checked the screen to see if the call was still connected. It was connected. I have to pick my daughter up at 3, he said. Something about the way he said it, not as a complication, not as an excuse, just as a plain fact about his day, the most important fact about his day, made her throat feel tight in a way she had not expected. I know, she said. We will schedule everything around it. The phone call lasted 11 more minutes after that. Marcus asked 2 questions. The first was whether the position came with health insurance. Delia said yes. From the first day, no waiting period. She had made sure of it, because she had noticed the gap when she reviewed the employment terms. He was quiet for a moment when she said that, and she understood, without him saying anything, what that particular detail had meant. His second question was whether the other employees knew about any of this. She said no. She said it was his information to share, or not share, entirely his choice, and that the acquisition would be communicated to staff as a standard business transition. He thanked her. He said he would like to accept the position. She said she was glad to hear it. She told him to report to the facility the following Monday. She said someone from HR, not Paige, a different person, someone from the Marsh operations team, would have his paperwork ready. She said the supervisory role would begin with a 2-week handover period. He said all right. Then he said, I just want you to know, I did not stop because I thought something would come of it. I stopped because you were in the ditch. I know that, she said. I would have stopped for anyone, he said. I know that too, she said. After she hung up, she sat at her desk for a moment with her hand still on the phone. Stuart appeared in the doorway and asked if she needed anything. She said no. She said she was just finishing up. The fluorescent lights in the warehouse were the same lights they had always been. The dock smelled the same. Diesel and cardboard, and the particular metallic edge of cold air coming in through the loading bays. The forklift Marcus was assigned to was not his old one, which had been reassigned, but it ran the same, and the controls were in the same positions, and by the end of the first hour, it made no difference. He was floor operations supervisor now. That meant he had a desk in the small glass-walled office at the edge of the dock floor, which he almost never used, preferring to be on the floor where he could see what was happening. It meant he signed off on safety protocols and reviewed incident logs and conducted the onboarding orientation for new hires. It meant he was the one they called at 4 in the morning when something went wrong on the overnight shift, and he accepted this without complaint, because it was part of the job, and the job was now something he was paid appropriately to do. Dwight Carver was not there when Marcus returned. He had resigned the week the acquisition was announced. No exit interview, no formal farewell. One morning he was there, and the next time Marcus came in he was not, and his name had been removed from the scheduling board, and nobody on the dock floor said very much about it in either direction. Marcus did not bring it up. He did not think about Dwight particularly. The man had made a decision based on reasons that were his own, and it had cost someone something, and now it was over. Marcus was not a person who spent energy on outcomes he could not change, or on people who had chosen to be smaller than the moment required. He had enough to think about. The new team took some learning. There were 23 people on the floor across the 2 main shifts, and they were a mix. Long-timers who had been there before Marcus was, and who watched him carefully in those first weeks, measuring whether he was the kind of supervisor who managed from the office or from the floor, and newer employees, who had no particular attachment to how things had been done before, and who mostly just wanted clear direction. He gave them clear direction. He was on the floor at the start of every shift, moving through the dock, checking the equipment logs, talking to the people doing the work, asking questions and listening to the answers. He did not pretend to know everything. When someone on the floor had more experience with a particular system than he did, he said so and asked them to walk him through it. This turned out to be the most effective thing he could have done, because people who are asked to share what they know tend to invest in the person who asked. By the end of the second week, the overnight shift lead, a woman named Carol who had been on the floor for 14 years and had a well-established reputation for being difficult with supervisors she did not respect, had started leaving him notes about small inefficiencies she had identified. Not complaints. Notes. Suggestions. The kind of thing a person only bothers to write down when they think someone is going to read it and do something useful with it. He read every one. He addressed the ones he could. He explained, in writing, the ones he could not address, and why. Carol stopped being difficult. The health insurance card arrived in the mail in his 3rd week. He put it in his wallet behind his license. He did not take it out and look at it more than once, but he thought about it several times. In the background, the way you think about an umbrella during a week of clear weather, grateful for its existence in a way that has nothing to do with whether you need it that day. He rescheduled Chloe's doctor's appointment, the one he had pushed back twice because of the gap in coverage. The pediatrician's office confirmed her records were active under the new insurance. He thanked the woman at the front desk more warmly than the situation strictly required. She seemed mildly startled by it. Home ran the way it always had, which is to say, imperfectly and consistently. He still packed Chloe's lunch the night before. He still read to her on weeknights, though they had finished her book and were now 2 chapters into a new one about a girl who could speak to horses, which Chloe had selected herself, and which she informed him was realistic, because horses were very intelligent and probably had things to say. He told her he did not doubt it. She asked him once, in that same second week, why he seemed less tired. He told her that sometimes things at work got better. She said, "Did you do something differently, or did something change by itself?" He thought about a phone call he had received on a Monday afternoon in his kitchen. He thought about a woman who had asked Stewart why a specific employee clause was in an acquisition addendum and been told that Miss Marsh had personal reasons she preferred not to disclose. "Someone did something kind," he said. Chloe considered this for a moment. "For you?" "For me," he said. She thought about it some more. "Was it because you did something kind for them first?" He had not told her about the accident on Route 9. He had not told her about Delia, or the termination letter, or the acquisition, or any of it. She was 8. She did not need to carry the weight of any of it. "Something like that," he said. She nodded as if that confirmed something she had already suspected about how the world worked, and went back to her book. The termination letter stayed in the glove compartment of the Civic. He had thought about what to do with it many times. He had thought about getting rid of it, shredding it, burning it, doing something final with it that would close the chapter clearly. He had also thought about keeping it somewhere more deliberate, framing it as a reminder of something. He did neither. He left it in the glove compartment because that was where it had ended up, and because he was not ready to decide what it meant yet. Not quite. It was still too close. The language in it, abandonment, failure to comply, the cold impersonal phrasing of a decision made by people who had never once thought about the woman in the ditch, still had a particular quality when he read it. A quality he could not fully name, but which sat somewhere between anger and something quieter than anger, something more like the feeling of having been told something revealing about the people who told it. He would figure out what to do with it eventually. There was no rush. Delia Marsh sent a card at Christmas. It arrived in a simple envelope with his name and address handwritten on the front, in the kind of handwriting that suggested someone who had learned to write carefully and had kept the habit. Inside was a card with no printed message, just a clean front, and inside that she had written in the same handwriting, "Thank you for staying." That was all. No explanation of what she meant by it, no elaboration on the acquisition, or the addendum, or the phone call, or any of it. Just those 4 words, which managed to carry, in the way that the best 4 words do, everything that a longer letter would have said less well. Marcus read it twice. He put it on the refrigerator, not with a magnet in the center but tucked into the side, behind Chloe's drawing of the horse that looked like a cloud with legs, so that it was visible if you were looking, but not the first thing you saw. That was where it stayed. Chloe noticed it one morning while he was making coffee. She pulled it out and read it and put it back. "Who is that from?" she said. "Someone I helped," he said. She put it back behind the horse drawing. "You should keep that one," she said. He told her he planned to. He poured his coffee and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard, which was covered in the thin gray snow that Ohio gets in December. Not enough to be beautiful, just enough to cover the ground. A bird was sitting on the fence post near the left corner of the yard, a small brown bird that he could not have named, sitting very still in the cold. He watched it for a moment. Then he finished his coffee, packed Chloe's lunch, put her homework folder in her backpack, and began the ordinary work of another ordinary morning, in a life that was, by every visible measure, the same as it had always been. Except that it was not. And he knew that, and she knew that, in the way children know things that nobody has explained to them. And somewhere across the city, in an office with a wall of windows, a woman who had once told a stranger about a coat she bought in Edinburgh was sitting at her desk with a cup of tea and a full day of work ahead of her, and she was not thinking about Route 9 particularly, except in the way that certain moments stay in the peripheral vision long after the moment has passed, not demanding attention, just present, just quietly and permanently part of the picture. The bird on the fence post flew away. Marcus picked up Chloe's backpack, called her name, and told her they were going to be late. She appeared at the top of the stairs with one shoe on and her hair in her face, holding the horse drawing she had just added to before he could stop her. "I gave it more legs," she told him. He told her horses did in fact have 4 of them. She told him she knew that. She said the extra ones were for running faster. He put her coat on her, and they went out the door into the cold morning, and the day began the way days begin when the worst is behind you, and you have not forgotten it, but you have also not let it be the whole of the story. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough.